Thank you very much for this introduction. It's always astonishing to hear about the person one is supposed to be. So please don't believe everything and listen to what I have put together for today. It is work in progress, first of all, and it is intended to initiate discussions. There is a lot that I've learned over the past years by being in touch with humanities, which was not the first time in my life. I grew up in a humanities family, and so every time at breakfast we had to talk something about humanities, and which was great, which was nice, but afterwards in the end I decided to study physics. I did not, no, it was fine, it was great, but it's not everything, and it's not at the end of the day, it doesn't make you complete. At least it doesn't make me complete. So now I come to the more difficult things, which is humanities, to make you complete as a person. And I studied this thanks to the Rachel Carson professorship about a year ago. But it grumbled in me for a long time, all this talking and thinking about environment, and this is what is the stage. So it is a work in progress thing that I will present to you now. But first of all, let me give you, here we go. Let me give you an idea of what we're doing, of where I come from. This is where I come from. This is my grandfather. My grandfather, that was his impression or perspective of landscape. And this is about 50 years ago when he was painting this. And this is my perception of landscape. Not exactly the same place, but it's also agriculture. It's his view of an Italian landscape after the harvest, and this is my view of a German landscape also after the harvest. So a lot of things have changed, and these two images of the globe, or of pieces of the globe, they both contain information, and they both contain something that we can use to understand what's going on. And my grandfather tried to do that, and I'm also trying to do that. So what we do, just as a short, or what are we interested in, me and my group? So most of the papers were not by myself, most of the papers were by people who are working with me and who push the things forward, is first of all to look at the Earth. This is Innsbruck, this is the Zugspitze, this is very close to here, a very complicated part of landscape. We look at this with the satellites, so the satellites look at this and we look at the images, and at the same time, what we do is to simulate these images. So we take models, and these models produce or describe processes that are very different. Farmers' activities and decisions, urban sprawl, plant physiology, topography, meteorology, soils, infrastructure, and that run through the processes that run in the landscape, and at a certain date here, 14th of July, 2003, simulate what we've seen. So this is a result of all the processes that were taking place and that we have considered here. This is, I don't consider this as a model. This is a compilation of something like 750 papers that were operationalized and made consistent to be able to describe what is leading to this image. The question is, and this is what's always interesting, this model simulates processes, and there's a difference between what we see in reality and what we simulate. It's very boring if those two images are the same. What is interesting is, what is the difference here between those two? So everything that is not on the one-to-one line is a mistake, is not understood. So understanding this, what makes the differences between the real image and the simulated image, this is making us tick. And what do the difference between the same simulations and the measurements tell us about our lack of process understanding? For us, this is the important question. And there is a lot that we can derive from this. Water has to flow, plants have to grow. All this has to take place to simulate such an image. And if we're right, we say, as scientists, we have understood it. We're far from right, still. So, what about agriculture? This is a short movie, about 1.5 minutes, about modern agriculture in Andex. Most of you have been to Andex already. It's during an excursion. And this we discovered about a year ago when we were having a walk near Andex, about the same time of the year. The Alps you see here in the back. And you see what is happening here. This is modern agriculture. It's not enough to have just one machine. There's the next machine coming up. Yeah? And what they do is they collect grass. Now this machine is picking it up, this machine is picking up the next one. It's not enough to have two machines to do this. No, there's another machine coming up. This one is making these piles here. And now this one is going there and putting this there. So we were both, my wife and I, she's also here, we were both astonished and had the feelings, well, is this okay? Is this anything that has to do with reality? The reality of the globe? Is this what is giving us the food that we eat every day? Is this only here? Or is the whole globe like this? Or will the whole globe be like this? And if, what does it mean? No. So many questions by just walking around Andex and looking at this. So you may think this is exaggerated. This is a movie. So this brought me, after a whole lot of thinking, to some theses. If you think about the globe and some mega trends that are the basis for these theses that I will present to you now and that I will try to consolidate during my talk. So we have certain mega trends that lead us into the future. The first mega trend is we will live in a more populated, wealthier, and more urban world. This is seems to be quite trivial, but this is a very fundamental mega trend. The peak population will be reached by 2050 somehow, and will be something like 9.5 billion people. Yesterday we were at the exhibition of the Anthropocene, and there was one of these lines written. It is estimated that the population by 2100 will be 8 billion people. And that was an estimate in 1964 by the Rand Corporation. And I'm quite sure they are right, but they haven't told us in 1964 that it will go down from 9.5 to 8. So they are right, but in a very wrong perception. Yeah. So what has happened in the meantime since 64 is we have discovered that population dynamics are different from what we thought. Food demand will double until 2050, not the population, but the food demand, and still increasing afterwards. So there's a totally different tendency in the food demand than in the population dynamics. The thesis that I want to present to you are, first of all things will follow us on our way into the internet. It will not be an internet of persons alone in the future, so we will have companions. All things and we will coexist in two forms, real and virtual, at least two forms. The human-environment relationship will be determined by the interaction of the real and the virtual environment. Agriculture is the core of human-environment interaction, and agriculture has become an information business, so will preserving nature. Environmentalism will all be about information sovereignty in the future. Oops. The current cropland, as it is, can feed us, or will be able to feed us, and I will show this from our own research, sustainably, and the question is, what is the price? What is the price tag on this sustainable food supply? So the consequence is to understand what happens when real and virtual world interact. This is something that is very hard for a natural scientist. So first of all, population dynamics. This is 1950 to 2050, 100 years of population dynamics, and you see since about 1964, this is the Cultural Revolution in China, the only imprint into the population dynamics that we can see on the globe. This is something like 60 or 70 million people dying. Afterwards, the increase in population, the annual increase in population has gone down, and the security with which we know this is much better than climate change. So this is a stable tendency. This will leave us with something like 9-something billion people by the year 2050, and about from 2020 on, the rural population will decrease. So we have a rush into the cities. We will have megacities that are as large as we cannot imagine today, and the rural areas will be depopulated. This is happening already, and I will show you also something on this. Whoop. At the same time, we have a change in GDP. So the world will become wealthier, at least in terms of material wealth. And what you can see here is, this is GDP here, logarithmically, and this is the change in GDP. So the countries with a low GDP have a larger change than the countries with a large GDP. So the poor countries, poor quote-unquote countries, will become rich faster than the rich countries. So they catch up. So we will have a more wealthy world, most probable, in the future. Mega trends also is, this is not working too well, and this is shown here, you may have seen it already, we are changing the land. Agriculture is expanding, 1910, 1930, 1970, 1990, and it has stayed like this. So this is saturating. There are no places on the globe that we can, no large places on the globe that we can discover newly. We cannot expand anymore our agriculture. So food security issues are land issues, and the options for expanding agriculture in terms of area are minimal. Oop. So what has happened instead, and this is an interesting graph to me, again this is logarithmic, this is the surface area per worker in agriculture. So this is 1 hectare, this is 10 hectares, 100 hectares, and 1,000 hectares. One worker can work on that much land. And this is the cereal produced per worker in tons per year. You have the before 1850, you have before 1900, and you have all the rest. What you see is a tremendous increase. So you have the manual farming here with about 1 hectare that one person can work on, and you have about 1 ton of cereals that this person can produce. This is the subsistence farming area, and the world has, at least the Western world has grown out of this and has steadily increased through mechanization from 1910, first tractors, 1930, 1960, 1980, 2000, the mechanization has increased efficiency. If I would have told my grandfather, who was a farmer in the Alps, who had 10 children, if I would have told him that 100 years after that we will be here, in terms of how much one person can work and how much a person can produce, he would have called me crazy. Impossible. No way. So this is what this lady here is doing. Without fertilizer, producing 1 ton per hectare on 1 hectare of land. This is in Burkina Faso. But there are many, many places on the globe where it's still like this. And this is what is done on these fields here, on the other side. And this is stagnating. Because tractors have a certain speed. This is a geographical question. And I look at Gordon. Tractors have a certain speed, and one person sits in a tractor, and you have to drive a certain distance over the year to work the fields. And one person with the tractors of today can do about 150 hectares. This is not very fancy in terms of intellectual, it's just looking at people and looking what they do. So we stagnate at the moment here at about 150 hectares. So this is what a person can increase here. It can produce more yield with the same tractor. So not more fertilizers, maybe more other plants, I don't know what. But this is also kind of stagnating. So we're waiting for what? For a tractor that doesn't need a person. Very logical. Google is working on that. So we will have tractors in the future where no people sit in. So everything we've seen before, with the 4 people working with the 4 different machines, it's all Google. So the machines will work themselves, and farmers sit somewhere in their houses and watch the tractors travel around. We are by far not there, and we don't know what it means that this is going to happen. I can only tell you that working the land in that way is very, very challenging. I did this for 10 minutes, and then I decided it would be a much better idea to speak with this lady and ask her, what are your perspectives for the future? And then she said, and that was 5 years ago, and then she said, I will go to the city. All my dreams, all my aims, everything is in the city, because she's a member of a family of 5, and one is always sick because of malaria or whatever. One is always somewhere, and 3 have to work, and this resulted in her not being really able to read and write. So this is no perspective for nobody. I would not want anybody to have this kind of perspective for his or her future. Now, what's going to come up with mega trends? This is GDP, again, per capita, so we can talk about this, from 0 almost to 30,000. And this is percentage of population in agriculture. And you can see if you have a low GDP, you have up to 90% of people working in agriculture. This is how it was when my great-grandfather was working here in the Alps. This was about what people were working at in the Alps. And this is 1 ton per year, 1 hectare per worker. And this is 2,000 tons per year and 150 hectare per worker here. And the increase in GDP will move this whole thing towards this direction. So the depopulation of the rural areas, with people going to the cities, is a process that you can also see here. So we will have less people out in the countryside working more land per person as the different countries increase in their GDP. So these are all megatrends. This is not something I have invented. There's another interesting megatrend also. You can see here, this is meat consumption per person, and here, and this is the income per person, and here. And there's only one country where it doesn't really go up, and this is India. With all the other countries, you have a nice line going up with increasing income. So if the world becomes wealthier and everybody likes to have that, there will be more meat consumption. So more calories for the animals and less calories for the persons. There is also tremendous dynamics in the global trade of food. This is soybean imports of selected regions, and you will think, okay, this is a strange graph because most of it is steady. You look at the EU, the import of soybeans in the EU is very steady. This pink area here is China. And this is how China has dynamically increased its soybean import over the last years, and it will do so in the future. So China is starting to buy out all the soybean that is produced on the globe to produce its own meat supply for its own population. So we will live in a more populated, wealthier, and more urban world. The peak population will reach 9.5 billion by around 2050, and the food demands will double until 2050, both because of population increase and changes in lifestyles. How can this increase be met? That's one of the big problems, or one of the big issues that half of the globe is discussing at the moment. There will be different options, and I will go through the developments that may lead to that. One is this here. This is the election of the Pope. And I think it's a great, I mean, I wouldn't have stepped over this picture like 10 years ago when I was a natural scientist by heart. But this is just great. This was 2005, this was our Pope, as the Bild Zeitung said. We are Pope. And this is 2013. So the images are almost the same. But there's a big difference in the images, Smartphones and the internet. Everybody has a smartphone out here. So this is also connected with reverse causalities in consumption. Amazon already knows what I want, and they send me what I want. And then I receive the package, and then I say, well, wait a minute, how do they know? But this is exactly what I wanted. So this is not how I used to buy things that I wanted to buy. Curiosity as a commodity in Google. This is where we changed from the customer to the product as we go to Google and look for information. This is public friends in Facebook, where you have, together with this kind of development, of course also this kind of development. I said all things will follow humans on their way into the internet. There is a global kind of living being being created by this network of information that is exchanged. This is a snapshot. In 2010, I haven't found anything newer about this, but this is the connectivity of people in Facebook on the globe. Everything will exist in two forms, from real and virtual. If you look at this here, this is not the existing climate. This is not the existing wind speed. This is the wind speed that is produced by a climate model. So you can have the real wind speed, you can have the wind speed here, and again the question is, what is the difference? But you will never see this real wind speed in reality. You only see it here. And what is happening when you see this in comparison to what is happening really? And this is an example that we have been doing with remote sensing data, observations. This is a palm oil plantation here that you see. This is one in 1994. And this is the same palm oil plantation in 2005, and the question was, can it be certified as being sustainable? Because only then they can import palm oil into the EU. And the question is, it looks terrible here, in a way. The question was simply, did they cut pristine trees to expand their palm oil plantation, because then it would not be possible to import them into Europe? Or was this all palm oil already in 2003, 2005? 2003, and then it would be possible because no new tree is cut. So in Indonesia, it was verified from Munich that this is okay. No new tree was cut. And nobody went there. Afterwards, somebody went there to verify this. But it was enough to have these images to know in detail about the sustainability aspect of this region on the globe that has to do with politics, with real politics, and with the import of renewable resources into the EU common market. So a tree only will exist as long as it exists in the Internet of Things. If we know that it is there, it will not be cut. If we don't know it's there, it will be gone. Somebody will cut it. So everything will move and follow us into the internet. So what do we do with these models? And how do we apply these models to agriculture? And then the question, what does this mean for us? What we use is meteorology. What we use is such a process model, and we let it run. We let it run for different fields of a farmer, and we show things that the farmer can't see. So simply by running the processes, the farmer cannot see the biomass of the plants on his field, and he cannot see that the biomass is different. He may see some differences, but he cannot say how much. And by letting this run, no. It has run, it did run already, right? No, wait a minute. Technology. Maybe, ja. Und jetzt? Klicken? Ja? Ja. By letting this model run and having satellites observing the field, you get more and more information over the year about how things are different on this field here. And you see, it's becoming more and more concrete that there is a lot of biomass produced here, there is not a lot of biomass produced here, and at the end of the year, you can tell the farmer, okay, this is how much you have harvested, or you will harvest here in different places of your field. Why is this important? Farmers are wasting nitrogen. Nitrogen is polluting the groundwater, and this is a large effect on non-sustainable agriculture. A large reason for non-sustainable agriculture. So if you could motivate the farmer to use nitrogen just as much as they need to produce what they produce, you could do a lot for sustainable agriculture. So this is what we're trying to do. This is what we can make visible, and this is a distribution that you don't see usually when you look at the field. This is the nitrogen content in the leaves. So different places in a field, you have different nitrogen contents, and they are very much, and this is from the satellite and the model, and this is very much coinciding with models, with measurements, and you see that these satellite images and models together determine the nitrogen status of the plants at each location in the field, and then, this is very nervous, and then decisions are made by the farmer to exactly apply as much as is needed in different points of the field. So this is something that is helping the farmer to minimize his input and put on the field exactly how much is needed by the plants. So nothing is wasted and polluting the groundwater, and the same with pesticides, and the same with other resources that are needed. This kind of information, and this is why I said a farmer will be not the farmer of the past, he will be an information worker. This is creating an environment, a real environment here of water, soil fertility and energy for the farmers, but also a virtual environment, a cyber environment of global sensors, of clouds, of the cloud and communication, and of simulations and data assimilation that enable the farmer to exactly put on his field as much as is needed and not more, and thereby increase efficiency. And for this he needs some tractors and also some local sensor networks. And this we call the cyber environmental future farming system. What does this mean if we put this on the globe? This was our next question. Everybody on the globe is using this, pictorially. This is what comes out if all these small farms are distributed around the globe and run for 1 year and produce corn. We have also others. So here you see how the corn is growing in different parts of the globe, using a climate model and just letting the corn grow, and you have more than one harvest in some places, you have one harvest in Germany, and you see how much is produced, how much biomass is produced by this, and this is now going around in circles, but it gives you an impression of what this cyber environmental model system is able to do for the moment. So We assume here that all farmers can do what I have described and can do optimally what is possible, and the result is that the global maize harvest would increase threefold. Without more impact in terms of the environment. Now, what about the future climate? What about climate change in the future? This is where you can grow agriculture on the globe today. And this is the change in suitability of a climate 2071 to 2100 versus the past. And you see everything that's green is better and everything that's red is worse. You see that there are positively affected areas. This is Canada. This is northern China. And this is Russia, mainly. Those are, at least Canada and Russia, they are objecting the Kyoto Protocol actively now. There is a reason why. They make profit from CO2 increases here. Large areas that are, and there are other areas that are not as well off in India, in southern Europe, in the Mediterranean region, where the agricultural conditions get worse. Altogether, this is a number between 0 and 1. Altogether, it doesn't change too much in the future. It's just changing locally from one region to the other, which has tremendous impacts, of course, on the distribution of wealth on the globe. And this is an interesting issue that not many people have looked into it up to now. But you can assume from this, or you get as a result, or we get as a result from this, that the global production, the global food production can be increased easily on the cropland that is available by a factor of 2. Now, what is happening? We have a real world as a conclusion. The real world usually ends at present, and there will be a real world in the future, hopefully, but there is only one realization of the real world. There is only one past, and there will be only one future. That's different if you simulate. You have one simulation or many simulations of the past. Now you can simulate different scenarios of the future. You have path dependencies here. Now multiple realizations of scenarios, and you can learn from them. And this creates an interaction between what you learn about the future in the modeling systems and what is the decision here. Because people take a decision at the present. And these decisions are influenced not only by the past, no, they are influenced also by what we learn about the futures that are possible and about different trade-offs of the futures that are realized in these modeling systems, in the virtual world. So, this decision will make different choices about the future. So it influences what is happening here, influences what is happening here. And this is where it becomes interesting. So simulation is the core of information agriculture. Interactions of real and simulated world will determine future agriculture in terms of climate, resource use, logistics, and markets. Simulated environment influence decisions on the future of real environment. This is the core of the discussion, in my opinion. What is happening there? How is this influence working? How do the models or this cyber environment influence the real environment? And this is where we should point our interest to. So, I come to the bottom line. Our simulations show that at least twice as much of food as today could be produced sustainably on current cropland with current water resources. This is sufficient for future generations. The sustainable intensification of today's cropland seems to be the best option to feed 9 billion people. Not to expand into some wild areas, it's not necessary. Can only be achieved by globally transforming agriculture into an information business. We need to have all these technologies. No expansion of current cropland is necessary. This is the good news. We can potentially keep all these areas that we think are very, very precious. No climate change-induced expansion into the global protected natural areas is necessary. Climate change will shift, nevertheless, cropland to more favorable areas. No further destruction of tropical rainforests or wetlands needed, and no genetically modified plants necessary. We can do this with the plants that we have, basically. So this astonished us too, as a result, because it doesn't look that dim altogether, the whole issue. Nevertheless, there is a price to pay for this. And the price, to me, is the Anthropocene. It's not, is it positive or negative, but it's the price. What does it mean in this sense, in my opinion, the Anthropocene? It's the human domination of the planet through knowledge and information. And it's the responsibility about everything that we acquire by doing this. It's, if we go into down this path, this is, to me, the consequence. It's that we will only have 3 to 5% of the global population that will produce food. They will have to be well educated, well equipped with information technology. Each farmer, each tree, each lake, etc. on the globe will be integrated into the cyber environmental system of the Anthropocene. All farmers become information workers and minimize use of natural and industrial resources. The question is, does this mean sustainability through efficiency? I don't know. I think we have to find out. A minimum of 4 billion people will be resettled from rural areas to megacities within the next 40 years. 7.5 of these 9.5 billion people will live in megacities, finally. So we have a gap between humans and nature that is widening, increasing, and we have farm sizes that are increasing, which is necessary to be efficient. Rural cultures are largely transformed, homogenized, and connected to the global food market and the global social networks. This to me, I mean, you may have a different opinion of the Anthropocene, but this to me is the consequence of the Anthropocene. Questions remain, at least for me. Will the algorithms in the models make the decisions? Who makes the decisions in this world? Will companies own the information in models? Or who owns them? What perception of nature and environment can 7.5 billion megacity people have? No idea. If I think what I know about the environment in comparison to my grandfather, after the cyber environmental system has completely ingested the megacities and the agricultural environment, how will we perceive and treat what is left over? The remaining, not even agriculture, the remaining natural environments, the water resources, the biodiversity. We only know them from either simulations or from television, if it still exists, or whatever that kind of simulated or unreal world is that is presented to us sitting in the megacities in air conditioning system. And the most important question to me is, who will be responsible? Who will make the decisions? Who will be the one to say when to shut down the computers? So, I have something to offer, which is maybe stupid or maybe a good idea. Why don't we write a history of the future of agriculture in which we try to explain how information agriculture completely integrated nature into human societies, each plant, each field, each drop of water, each animal, each farmer. How models created a virtual world which made visible the state of the Earth system, the living conditions, identities and potentials of all living beings, humans, animals, plants. How this made feeding 9.5 billion possible in a sustainable way. How and why I think we failed to share this virtual world equitably among all societies of the planet and convert information from a commodity to a public good. At the moment, it's a commodity. How globally operating private entities were able to monopolize knowledge and information, appropriate nature, lever out nation states, and use the virtual world to redefine both natural species and the identities, shopping desires, and living scripts of all human inhabitants of the globe. How was that possible? The purpose to me of this history of the future of agriculture is to explore how not to fail at the start of the Anthropocene. And this is the end of my talk, and I'm very curious about your reaction and about questions and discussions and everything. Thank you very much.